Hey guys, so this is my final video and full build guide for my Poisonburst Arrow Deadeye. Now, originally when I made this character, I had one goal in mind, and that was to make it clear and play a lot like a Lightning Arrow Double Herald's Deadeye would play. Now, I would say that while we didn't get to that point, I don't think there's anything in this game that's going to be getting to that point of clear with Double Heralds. I would say that this build definitely has very competent clear rate, and it is to the point where I would say when I'm doing breaches, it kind of feels like there's not enough spawn a lot of times. So it's definitely very competent and very fun to play, and it kind of clears in certain ways that you would never expect it to clear. It kind of, there's a lot of times where I'm like going in and around corners and I'm like, wait a second, how are these mobs already dead? And it's fun because of that. And it's not a Double Herald's build, so it has that going for it as well. But all in all, I would say that Poisonburst Arrow is still not as good as the other poison skills, Gas Arrow and Poisonous Concoction. But I would say in terms of clear, I don't think that those skills will ever get to the point that Poisonburst Arrow will be able to get to. Just by the fact that it can kill mobs off screen while those builds can't, because obviously the arrows don't go off the screen in that one because they land on a spot and hit that area. But with Poisonburst, you're able to shoot an arrow and it'll fly across the screen even off the map. So it'll be able to hit enemies off the map, and as a result, increasing your clear rate and clear speed, which is great. Now, right now, the build does, everything very, very well. It does mapping very well. Bossing, it's never going to be a bossing character, okay? Like, we did Trial Master last night, and that was kind of a struggle, but we did it. But tier 15, tier 16 bosses, it's going to be just fine. And honestly, really, my character isn't super invested into. It only has about 10 to 15 divine investment at the moment, which in the grand scheme of things, it might be, sounding like a lot, but where we are in the game right now, 10 to 15 divines is pretty modest for a character, I'd say, especially for the clear that it's getting in mapping right now. And with more investment, you're definitely going to be able to get a lot more damage and a lot more clear with this character. I just don't want to invest that much. But yeah, let's take a look at our character right now. So we are currently a level 93 Deadeye. We are running CI, so we have 1 life, 3.2k energy shield, 1k mana, 130 spirit, 73% evasion, which is very, very low. You can get this up higher if you invest more into the character, especially because we have Wind Dancer, right? 4 stacks of Wind Dancer, very, very low. And we are maxed out on resist, and we don't care about chaos resistance because we are CI. Now, we have a lot of it because we are running Hoa, but we'll go into that in a little bit in our gear section. Right now, for our character, we are running Poisonburst Arrow. It is 5 linked. We have Chaos Infusion, Fork, Deadly Poisons, Ambush, and Concentrated Effect. Fork is really to help with clear. Now, this, I would say you should put on only if you have good damage for clearing, like if you're clearing pretty comfortably, because if your damage isn't great, the fork isn't going to help that much at the end of the day, because it does do 50% less damage when forking. So any arrows that are forking out will do 50% less damage. And then Deadly Poisons is to help with clear, because a lot of our clear comes from Herald of Plague, and that spreads the most damaging poison out there. So you want your poisons to be strong. So this is going to help us a lot with that. We run Ambush because it generally just feels bad to not crit on enemies when you're clearing. I like to run around, shoot 1 arrow, and forget it, because if it doesn't crit, you gotta shoot it a couple more times because you do no damage when you don't crit. So that's why I have Ambush, and I try to have as close to 100% crit as possible. Well, close to 50% crit right here, which gets doubled by Ambush. Ideally, I'd like to have this at 50% and above, but our gear doesn't allow for that right now. And then Concentrated Effect. This honestly adds a ton of damage to our character. Now, the arrow itself won't be affected by Concentrated Effect, right? But the Poison Burst part will be. And you don't really care about the AoE of your Poison Burst arrow because most of your clear is coming from Herald of Plague anyways. So if we take this off, you can see our damage goes down to 58,000 damage per second. And then we put this on and it goes to 81,000. So quite a bit of an increase right there, almost doubled. So you really want to be using Concentrated Effect with this build. It just adds a lot of damage. So talking about our gems a little bit, our support gems. Right now I'm using Fork, but as I mentioned, if you don't have that much damage, you probably don't want to use Fork. Instead, what I would use is Bursting Plague. Now, Bursting Plague is really, really cool because Herald of Plague, it only carries the most damaging poison, right? It spreads the most damaging poison on enemies you kill at a 1.8 meter radius. Now, this doesn't count towards that. Bursting Plague spreads on its own. So basically, you'll have Bursting Plague, which is 200% of your poison damage, right? And you're just going to be spreading that to enemies up to a maximum of 10% of their life. So there is an upper limit for this, but it will increase your damage because it adds an extra layer of damage, but also that will get spread along with Herald of Plague, whereas normally Herald of Plague only spreads the poison, the one stack of poison itself, right? So that's very nice for when you don't have a lot of damage, but personally, I would say that Fork is still better for clear if you have the damage, because Fork can hit further away enemies, whereas Herald of Plague, you're basically not increasing the area of Herald of Plague at all. You're just increasing your damage that goes along with Herald of Plague. So if you're able to clear well, I would recommend using Fork. But if not, then I would recommend using Bursting Plague. When you're bossing, you also want to add in Comorbidity instead of Ambush, because Ambush is only for your initial hit, right? For when the bosses or the enemy's HP is full HP. So you're going to want to swap that in if you can. So if you're really going for a full damage setup, drop in Bursting Plague, drop in, Comorbidity, and boom, that's your bossing setup right there. But when you're just mapping, you can go and do this. But also during a mapping boss, maybe you don't feel like you need Bursting Plague, then you just pop in like this right there or something like that, and just put in Comorbidity. The extra stack of poison is helpful for bossing, but it's not really helpful for mobbing, especially because our arrows, we don't have 3 arrows right now because our bow doesn't have an additional arrow. But if you have an additional arrow, it might make sense to add Comorbidity in there just to make it so that you're able to stack to a maximum of 3 poison stacks on monsters even when you're clearing. But for the most part, I don't think that's necessary. I've been able to clear just fine without it. So even when you have 3 arrows, you don't have to add that on there. Fork, again, will just increase your clear, so just use that instead. Now, Vine Arrow, we use this for bossing as well as if there's any times where there's just, an enemy that, like, I don't know, maybe feels like a little bit too tanky. You drop in Vine Arrow on top of it, and you shoot a Poisonburst. Usually if the enemy's close, if the Vine Arrow is aimed well, it will proc like that and add damage to the enemy. And we have Conduction and Lightning Infusion to shock enemies, basically. Especially when we're bossing, it's nice to use this to sometimes shock the enemy. And then we have Font of Rage to generate rage while we're next to it to do more damage. And then Swift Affliction, just because it'll increase the damage to the DPS of Vine Arrow. So that's kind of the setup we have there for our single target. We don't really use this during mapping much. Maybe sometimes every now and then there's a rare that I just want to get rid of quickly, or if it's like there's an essence, right? And I just drop it on top of the essence and then just shoot it when it comes out. Instantly dies. We have Eye of Winter with Withering Touch and Unleash. Very, very good because Eye of Winter inflicts critical weakness, helps us crit more against bosses, and then Withering Touch to deal Wither on bosses. This is basically only for bosses. That's all we use it for. And then Despair, honestly, I don't even use it that much for bosses, but you can drop it on the boss as well to increase your damage there. We have Heightened Curse, Persistence, and Magnified Effect just to increase our area of effect to make sure the boss doesn't miss the boss. We have Wind Dancer as our spirit gem, Ghost Dance, Grim Feast, and Herald of Plague. Now, this is kind of a very basic setup for this type of character. Wind Dancer, Ghost Dance, very, very good survivability for evasion characters. Grim Feast, really, really good for any character using Energy Shield, increases your HP pool by a ton. And Herald of Plague, this is our main kind of spreader for our poisons. This is where our AoE comes from. It's a very, very small AoE, unfortunately, 1.8 meters. And when you look at your tooltip, I think it's doubled, 3.6. And then we have Precision and Chaos Mastery on here. Honestly, I don't really know why I have Chaos Mastery. I was just thinking maybe at some point we would hit a threshold where it would upgrade to the next one. You don't need to put this on here, to be honest. You might even want to use this on your damage setup. But personally, I don't use it because I think it's just on a Poisonburst arrow because I just think it uses too much mana. So you can use this on Poisonburst arrow if you want to increase your damage. It'll increase your damage more than any of these other things will. Like, you know, I guess your max kind of DPS build would probably be like Comorbidity and Chaos Mastery if you wanted to. But yeah, that's kind of neither here nor there. But we use Precision because we don't actually have that much dexterity. As you see with our character, we put everything into intelligence. So that's why we use Precision there. I have a cast on critical setup that I was trying to use to increase our single target damage, but honestly, it really wasn't doing that much. Like, even with Comet, it's not that much damage comparatively. All it does is just eat up our mana. Like, if you have a way to sustain mana, maybe you can turn these 3 off, right? What I used to do is I turn these 3 off and turn this on for our bossing setup, but honestly, it was at the end of the day not very, very good. So there's that. If you really wanted to increase your single target, maybe you could put like a flame wall situation here. Flame wall, so it adds a little bit extra flat fire damage, and that would be a little bit of extra damage there. So yeah, that is the gems. Now for our tree, we have, you know, we're going down both of these paths for our Ascendancy. Honestly, this last Ascendancy Tailwind is not very necessary. I didn't even get it until last night. So yeah, it doesn't really add much. Just increase your survivability, which for the most part, you're dodging things, right? Right now, same as last time, we have our Controlled Metamorphosis Diamond here to grab all these nodes around, just to get this. Like, is a very, very nice. You want a medium to large ring so you can grab everything, right? Falcon Technique, both your poison stuff here, get some movement speed and evasion rating. This is for extra damage, and this is for extra evasion. Very, very good. And also dexterity, right? You're going to want to have as much intelligence as possible, so this dexterity node is very, very nice. So that's a very, very nice spot to put this jewel there. In terms of our other poison or other jewels, we have a lot of poison stuff, so increase magnitude to poisons or ailments you inflict. Of course, critical hit chance is very, very important. You want to get it as close to 50% as possible, and increase bonuses gained from quiver. That's basically what you want on every single one of these. You can get crit damage as well, but that's very, very expensive, and I found that it doesn't really increase that much compared to magnitude of poison. Like, the damage is pretty much the same, so it's a much cheaper option to go with. So that's pretty much what you want in every single one of your jewels. I do have one that does have a recover mana on kill because we don't have much mana regen on this build, and having that helps us out with our clear a lot. Just not have to eat mana flasks all the time. Now, we do also have a time loss jewel here. As I mentioned in the last video, crit chance, energy shield is what we have on here. You could put some crit damage, you could put some ailment damage, things like that. Ailment magnitude, like, all those are really good for this build. But I just found something that was cheap. That was like 15 exalts, and just tossed it in here. But yeah, this is our tree. It's basically, you know, focused around crit damage, getting some poison magnitude wherever we can, and increasing our quiver and all that fun stuff. Now we have an anoint over here for this one right here. Lasting trauma increases ailment magnitude and duration, both very, very good. It does reduce our attack speed a little bit, but honestly, because we do run Falcon Technique, you really don't feel it at all. So that's kind of overall where we have our build. And yeah, it's overall feeling really good. Now for our equipment, we spent about 1 div on everything. This bow cost me 1 div. This helmet cost me 1 div. This is 1 div. 1 div, 1 div, or not 1 div, but 1 div over here. This one was about 1 div as well. This one as well. This one was even less. It was like 50 exalts or something like that. This is probably the most expensive thing, right? Well, Hoa as well. But if you don't have to have a 2-socket Hoa, like 1 socket Hoa is just fine. And that's like less than a divine or something like that. So very, very cheap. But original sin is going to be required for this build. You do want to have Original Sin because this will convert all your elemental damage into chaos damage, which means all the damage from your Hoa is going to be chaos damage, which will in turn add to your poison magnitude. And that will make it so your poison spreads and, does more damage, helps you with your AoE clear and things like that. Because without that, you're missing a lot of damage to your poisons and you're just going to be doing lightning damage instead of poison damage. So this is very, very important. And this cost me about 3 divine. So not super expensive in the grand scheme of things, but I'd say the majority of the cost in our equipment, like this is the most expensive thing here, which isn't that expensive. Now, what I would say is for your quiver, or sorry, not your quiver, for your bow. I've mentioned this before in the other video, but the cultist bow right now is the best bang for your buck because it has extra chaos damage with other bows like the dual string does not have. And being a build that focuses so much around chaos damage, and we even have increased to chaos damage on our tree, this adds a lot of damage. Like some of the quivers that, or the bows that I was looking at that slightly add to our damage cost like, I don't know, like 50 divine or something like that. It's not even that much damage. Like the only stuff that really adds a lot to your damage is if it has like a ton of elemental damage, right? A ton of flat damage on the bow, ton of flat elemental damage will add a lot of damage to your bow or to your character. So if you can find a dual string or whatever with a lot of elemental damage, you might want to consider that because cultist bow, unfortunately, is just not very much used. Like their selection of bows is very, very limited. It was to a point where I was trying to craft my own bow. And I actually was successful in crafting one of my own bows, which was great. This bow right here was something I crafted myself. And unfortunately, damage-wise, it wasn't as good as my current bow, but the bow attacks fire an additional arrow is so nice to use. Like, it's so nice to have. Having an extra arrow is just really nice. But unfortunately, damage just never compared to this bow right here, so we just didn't use it. If you can get a damage, like a extra bow projectile, an extra arrow, that would be pretty much best in slot right here. So yeah, if you can find if you want to use a dual string, you definitely can. It's nice, so you don't have to get that extra arrow on it. But finding one that gives you enough damage is probably going to be very expensive. So that's why I use the cultist bow. And in my opinion, it's just cool using an unused bow, right? So yeah, for our necklace, as I said earlier, we anointed lasting trauma. We have critical chance on this as well as energy shield. And we also have +3 to projectile skills. Now, you can use crit damage here as well, but I found that the +3 proj skills was more damage. If you can find a +3 proj skills on top of having critical damage, that would be amazing, but probably very, very expensive. If you notice on this build, we try not to have too much plus projectile skills, even though it does add a lot to our damage. It also adds a lot to our mana consumption, which usually is fine because you're just clearing for the most part. But whenever it comes to bossing, you end up having to eat a lot of mana pots. So that's why we try to keep that to the minimum. Wherever we can replace projectile skills with crit damage and get kind of the same damage, that's kind of like, what's the ideal. So we have projectile skills here, but typically I don't have it, like, we don't have it on our bow, right? So yeah. For our chest armor, very, very simple. Resists, energy shield, evasion, spirit. I wanted to make this a Queen of the Forest build, but unfortunately getting it to that point is just going to be way too expensive. We're probably going to need that unique jewel that adds evasion for int instead. So that's super, super expensive and not within my budget. So we just went with this to make sure that we have enough survivability and have some spirit for our spirit gems. As I mentioned earlier, we have Hoa, there for damage. We have our belt, there for resistances, that's triple res. Boots, just for survivability and intelligence. Also on the helmet, we do have critical chance on it. You could put int if you're okay with having a little bit less crit. It's about the same damage. Int is a little bit more, but you can do that as an option. And our ring just there to round out our survivability, our resistances. You can go full damage if you really wanted to. Like, we're an evasion build. We try not to get hit, and if we get hit, we kind of die anyways. So you can go full damage on this and add like flats to this. But I decided to go elemental resistances on it. So yeah, that is our gear and our character. Overall, like I said, if you want to make this character stronger, it's going to be a lot more investment into it, and it will get a lot stronger. But at the moment, I'm just not looking to invest that much money into this character, and we're pretty much done in terms of like building the character and making it run very efficiently. So yeah, that's about it. As always, if you enjoyed this video and have any questions, let me know down in the comment section below. And also, remember, if you can hit that sub button, it would be the best way to support this channel. As well as come to hang out on my stream, twitch.tv/misoxshiro. We stream every single night starting at 10 p.m. PST. So I'd love to see you guys there. But if not, hopefully I see y'all on the next video. All right, guys, enjoy this map. Other than like, you know, Sandspit, you know, this is one of the better ones. Very wide open, lots of area for breaches to kind of open up and stuff like that. Overall, very fun. Yo, what's up, Jenna? How's it going? God damn, it's late. Jeez, where have you been? Where have you been? Sandspit is my favorite. I think it's a lot of people's favorite. I mean, it's basically just like Strand from back in the day. It's very nice. Passed out. Damn, and you just woke up early? Is that what's going on? Light's still on? Damn, you wasn't tired. What'd you do today? Just work? Busy? Use Herald of Plague? I do. It's the only way that this build can really do good AoE. Without Herald of Plague, it would be really rough. I mean, Herald of Plague itself isn't a great skill for clear, but it's kind of all you can do with poisons. It's all we can do with poisons, because we can't use Herald of Ice or Herald of Thunder. Or, I mean, maybe you can, but, you know, it's not on theme. Not on theme at all. That's how we get the level of clear that we get on this character. Without Herald of Plague, it would not be clearing this well. Guys, overall, I really like this build. I think this build is so fun. This build is a lot of fun. Just like being able to melt breaches like that with a non-Herald of Ice and Thunder build, like come on, guys, come on. You gotta give me credit for, you know, making a nice little off meta kind of map clear, you know. I like this build, so let's do a new. I mean, you know, it's kind of my thing, right? You know, I don't really stay on one build for all too long because I like innovating and making new things. And this build, I think we're pretty much there for like figuring out how to like do a lot of the things that, you know, like a lot of the problems, right? We fixed a lot of problems already with this build, so that's kind of what I do. I take a build and I learn how to like build it and make it good. Then we kind of push it to like end game, and then, you know, beyond that, I'll let you guys do it. I'll let you guys do that. Level up, baby. I wish there was a setting to turn down, like, the cloud effects, the cloudy, wispy effects of Delirium. Because that shit is annoying and also hits performance quite hard. Same, yeah. Especially with how meta it is to, like, for people to throw Delirium onto their maps. It's kind of rough. And there's the part of the reason why we don't throw the Delirium on our map is because of that. Because of performance and, like, you know, all that shit, right? And it just, overall, I don't know, it just looks so gloomy. It looks so gloomy and sad. You'll get used to it. It's the lag that's the biggest issue. That you can't get used to. Printing divs, selling Delirium maps. What the hell? Well, selling Delirium maps? Is it just like people don't know how to get them, or what the? T16. I see. Tweak NVIDIA cPanel and graphic settings.
Too slow.
I mean, it's not, like, the thing is, like, you know, I also don't want to, like, you know, affect graphical fidelity either, right? Because, like, again, it's stream stuff, right? You want the game to look decent. Like, I don't think anybody enjoys watching 5 pixels move around on the screen, you know? At least I wouldn't. You look at somebody's screen, it's literally like 4 big pixels. It's like, okay, alright. I guess I'll tune in another stream. Path of RuneScape. 5090 should solve it. Sadly, it is very expensive. And also, very hard to get your hands on. I tried to get a 5080 today. It did not work. But yeah. I do not have the funds to get a 5090. Even 5080 is, like, you know, pushing it. But I was just like, you know, Monster Wild's coming around the corner. We should do it. Also, the thing is, like, I have a 3080 and the CPU is, like, not great and the motherboard is not great. So if I were to get any upgrades on my graphics card, I would probably have to upgrade my entire rig, basically. So it's just all not a great situation for me. Path of RuneScape. That was a game. That would be kind of cool. That would be that seems like it would be a sick-ass game. Let's see, what are these guys at? 240 something. I could probably take this one. Just continue deferring these two. What is this? Exalted Orb only adds prefixes. No. Alright. I think we cleared the map.